Good morning and happy Monday, everybody. It's a special one. You'll find out in a second. I am Angie Callen, your host of No More Mondays, the podcast where we explore the human side of modern work so that you can design the career, the business, and most importantly, the life that you love. Today's episode is brought to you by, take a guess, my book, Scary Good, Discovering Life Beyond the Sunday Scaries. It is officially out into the world. If you are not watching on video, I am holding a copy, which should make you want to watch on video. It will make you rethink how you live and work. So head on over to scarygoodread.com and grab your copy. And now it is time to get into this episode of No More Mondays, which is a little special because I am joined by Ron Monteiro. He is a speaker, facilitator, coach, and author of the very perfectly titled book, Love Mondays. If that isn't manifestation of two people who need to be talking together on a podcast about No More Mondays, I don't know what is. Ron helps leaders build high-performing teams and healthier work cultures, hallelujah, through practical training, immersive workshops, and speaking, all as part of his personal mission to help people reconnect with the purpose and the joy in their work. Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? It might just be scary good. This episode pretty much titled itself. And so without further ado, let's just bring Love Mondays onto the scene. Ron, welcome Love Mondays to No More Mondays.
I love it. Thank you, Angie. And congrats on your book. Super excited about it.
Thank you. I think Loving Mondays is pretty scary good. How's that for a nice mashup?
Hey, that's it. Put them together.
In a moment of truth, I titled, I think, Love Mondays, Scary Good, Discovering Life Beyond the Sunday Scaries, and No More Mondays are all an effort to combat the fact that Monday has become shorthand for dread. And that says a lot about, I think, the way that we've been approaching work, especially in corporate America. And lots of people out there going through the motion. They chase productivity, hustle culture, climbing ladders, titles. Stay busy doesn't necessarily mean you're fulfilled. So what does all of that mean to you, Ron, in the idea of why we should love Mondays?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And I think society has branded Mondays as a bad thing. And look, I understand why. I've had lots of occasions where I had the Sunday scaries or did not look forward to Monday. But I'm in a phase of my life where I actually love what I do. And I've worked hard to get there. And I've done the math. I'm a finance guy. We work 90,000 hours in our life on average. Okay. So my provocation is, shouldn't we love Mondays and every other day? Shouldn't we find little reasons to love it a little bit more? And so for me, like, I intentionally say to people, Happy Monday. And they look at me and they're like, what? But I really I love the concept of, like, how do we all just take steps to help each other love Mondays a little more?
So the 90,000 hours that's a hot button, because guess what? That is more than you sleep. And that's if you sleep well. Most of us don't sleep well. Yeah. So you work more than you do anything else in life. And I think that we diminish how significant that is to our overall satisfaction, and even more so the detriment that can be to our health, our well-being, our ability to have impact because of this culture of you work and then you go do fun things at 62 and a half.
Yeah. And honestly, many people don't make it to that, in a healthy state to that advanced retirement age, right? So, you want to climb Machu Picchu, or you want to go to different parts of the world and do all these adventures. And maybe from a physical standpoint, you can't do it. So it's a very flawed perspective. Yeah. But it's something that we all are pushed towards. Like, I was on that path and something disrupted it. I went to university, got my accounting designation, worked for 20 years in finance and accounting, and something changed for me, and I want to share that message with the world.
Okay, so I want to talk about what changed, because also, everyone, this happens to Canadians too, in case you haven't picked up on Ron being out and about. So what I want to understand, I'm going to ask a two-part question. What was your relationship with Mondays at that point in time, and what was the trigger that switched it?
Yeah. So again, with the 20-year career, there's many phases of it, right? So I had some phases which I love Mondays, some which I didn't. And I actually did work for Kraft Foods at the time for 15 years. We had a phenomenal work culture. And it was like one of those cultures where the people who I reported to believed in me more than I believed in myself. And it was hard, like deadlines and long hours and things like that. But the underlying culture was very supportive and helped you grow. And I think that growth kept me super engaged for 15 years. And
Yeah.
so there's many phases of my accounting career, which I loved. But towards the end of it, there was, I was kind of going through the motions. 20 years, I've done 240 month ends, and there wasn't that excitement and energy. And coupled with the fact that the cultures I went to after were not as invested in growth and
Mm.
development and things like that. It was more hit the quarter and let's get a bonus payout. And that was the spirit of my later years, which I didn't quite love Mondays.
Yeah, it started to feel kind of more churn and burn. And, I'll share for those of you out there listening have probably heard this story 249 times because what episode are we on? But you made it way further than I did in engineering. I made it 7 or 8 years, but it was a change in the culture of the industry as a whole brought on by the recession that for me in 08, 9, 10, that really started to kind of wake me up to the fact that like, I don't want to churn and burn boring projects. I don't want to pave parking lots on National Forest Service land so Copper Mountain can park more cars for skiing, right? I don't want to do a 241st kind of month end, right?
Yes, yes.
So just out of curiosity in your own change, like what were some of the first few steps you took once you kind of had that wake up call?
Yeah, I had a moment where I worked at Campbell Soup Company, great company, and I was enrolled in this training course. So I got this email saying, "Congratulations, you've enrolled in a training program." And again, like I'm being a little sarcastic here, but I went there, and it was led by 3 coaches, and honestly, they helped turn my life around in the sense that they helped me understand I was a teacher in finance clothing, is the way I explain it, as opposed to a finance person who loved leading training courses. And it was one of those light bulb moments. And the wheel started to turn, and then I started to say, what can I do to just teach more? So lead more training courses at work, volunteer to teach at universities and colleges, just any chance I got to teach, I was like, I'm going to do it. And then I hired one of those gentlemen, Wayne's his name, as my coach because he had walked the same path. Like he was in consumer packaged goods. And then at a certain point, he made a decision to go out on his own. So I was just like, okay, there's something there that triggered something in me. And I said, okay, wow, I can see a path here. I found a mentor slash coach, and I was like, okay, let's go.
Woo woo, commercial for coaching. Thanks, Ron, for queuing that one up. But now you're working with organizations, and I'm curious. You get way more data than just yourself when
Yeah.
you work with organizations and you look at teams. I'm curious from your perspective what you think contributes to the most to people losing that like joy in their work, or did they even ever had it? So there's a 2-part loaded question.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a multitude of factors, but I think for me, I think back to my best career experiences. It was much more than just going into work and doing your day job, so to speak. There's other ways to engage with colleagues, and whether it's social events or teams within the company, like just different things to engage beyond your day to day, right? And then you think about the pressures of work. So most of the companies I work for were public companies where, again, back to you have to hit the quarter.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens, you end up cutting training and you cut other stuff like offsites and all these things that contribute to a culture. And then what's left is a very transactional approach, right? And a very, call it a hard-nosed approach. So in the industry I worked on, it was just slash and burn all the budgets because, hey, if you hit the quarter or the year, you get a bonus. And yes, we all love bonuses, but not to the detriment of a culture, right? So I think we're in this world where, and think about inflation and tariffs and all these things that have happened globally, there's more and more pressure on people at the top of the organization. It's not their fault, it's the system. And what happens? So for me, I think it's a combination of all those things that have contributed to this.
One thing that I've observed in these conversations, coaching leaders, coaching teams, is how important culture actually is to satisfaction and retention. And that is where I get a little fired up about how close-minded what you just described is, because we lose sight of how much it actually costs to replace a staff. But also, as a company, shouldn't you want your humans to be happy? And so what I'm curious about is, are you seeing any kind of shift in that dynamic? in
I
this
think
day and age of work?
I think 2026. Something I think we were talking off camera. Something's different this year. So I think there's a little bit more appetite for investing in people. Again, it's the start of the year, so who knows? But I'll share a story. So when I was at Kraft, we had this leader, Dino Bianco, still a mentor of mine. He used to say, "I want to help my team build the resume they never have to use." So build the resume they never have to use. I'll repeat that. And I never really quite understood it while I was there, but I stayed for 15 years, never entertained a job offer while I was there. And I'm convinced it was the culture, like that type of culture, which said, my duty as a leader. So even when I was a manager, when I was a director, my duty as a leader was to build teams of the future. It wasn't just about me. It was like about the collective whole. So that's where, like, for me, it's like, as you said, it's like, it's very short-term thinking, because that, that cost of replacing staff, not just money wise, but knowledge, retention, all these things, is way more than investing a few, whatever dollars you are on your people. Like, it's
Yeah.
the math just doesn't work, right? When you think about it more medium to long term.
And you're a finance guy,
I'm a
right? Like,
finance
you
guy.
are the one who's going, here's the bottom line.
Yes.
But it's just so interesting that earlier this year, we interviewed Earl Hoig, who I feel like, Ron, you need to know. He literally has a company in Canada called People First. And it is incredible what type of business outcomes you actually get when you do put your people first versus shoving profit and margins down everybody's throat. Also, I want to put that guy on alert. The build a team who doesn't ever need the amazing
Dino
resume.
Bianco.
I want him to be on this show because that's the kind of leadership I would love to see. And I think I also agree with you that I'm seeing an appetite change, I think, in many different facets of life and work. And I think AI is contributing some to it, is this idea of like real human connection and relationships. I'm seeing it in sales. People want relational sales more. I'm seeing, live events people want to go back to, right? There's this need for like real human connection. And one of the things I've also seen from a business perspective is like the importance of human skills. And this type of culture-based leadership, with the idea of let's make our team love Mondays, or at least like Mondays, or at the very, very least not hate Mondays, can be a really, really key driver of helping your human have skills, build those skills, contribute back to an organization that creates a really, really, nice and purposeful connection. And it sounds like that's the type of work you help people, that's the type of work that helps people create those ecosystems.
Yeah, no, of course. Like, you can't go 2 seconds these days without hearing AI, but the other side of that is the connection, right? And just back to people first. So I've interviewed the ex-CEO of WD-40, Gary Ridge, who wrote a phenomenal book. It's called Any Dumbass Can Do It. It's a leadership book. But he always talked about putting people first. And then Howard Bahar, former president of Starbucks, and he has a book called Putting People First, Lessons at Starbucks. And this was way back when, 15, I think he started when there were 22 stores and he left when there were 15,000. So way back, and it was all about people first. And, when you walked into a Starbucks back in those days, the baristas genuinely wanted to see you. And look, there's still a lot of great Starbucks, but there's something a little different.
Yep.
But at the time, it was the leadership that carried right through to the final consumer, right? And so that's where it's really, really powerful. So I totally agree. And I think back to your point about leaders helping their teams love Mondays or hate them less, however you phrase that, I think it starts with the connection that you talked about. So, quick story, I worked in finance, and oftentimes you get into a meeting like this, okay, let's get right into the numbers. And you wouldn't even say hello half the time. You're just like right into it. Then I started working for a training company, and the first 5 minutes I was like, "Hi, Angie, how was your weekend? Did you watch the Super Bowl? How was Bad Bunny for the, and we talk, and I was like, I was a fish out of water, but I quickly realized I got to know people in that company in the first few weeks more than years at the previous companies, because you just didn't engage. And again, back to my finance roots, there's a high return on investment because you're building these connections. And when people know you care, they're going to jump in a little bit more. They're going to be a little more excited about it.
I love the humans still hire humans. Humans still buy from humans. And it does not matter how many layers of painful AI ATS and automation we put in the middle of those things, but they
Yeah.
are still two truths. And if you can lead in an environment that is human centered, you're just going to be better off. But now here's where I'm curious. How do we as leaders balance this idea of human first with what can very much be the complete opposite side of needing to perform and like boosting productivity, right? So how do we reconcile those two competing things and essentially have our cake and eat it too?
Yeah, I think they're very much related, right? Investing in your people is going to increase productivity. I mean, depends where you invest in it, right? But I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think that investment pays back and pays back really fast, right? Less turnover, higher productivity. And it could be investing in people learning AI. Like, I mean, they're not mutually exclusive. And so that's where I think that constant, how do I help my team grow in
Mhm.
soft skills and technical skills is
Yeah.
massive productivity.
And I want to make a point there. What Ron said was, how do I help my team grow? Dot, dot, dot. Not how do I progress my career as a leader? Because I think B happens if you do A and it will go further. What's the African proverb? If you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. And I think that's very true in the leader team dynamic because if you're a lone wolf leader who steps all over their team, they're not going to love Mondays. And
Yes.
they're probably not going to be productive because you haven't met them where they're at and understand how they're motivated and the people part of it.
Yeah, 100%. And that's where like getting to know your team and what motivates Angie versus what motivates Tom or somebody else.
Mm.
Like, or what did Angie do in the weekend? Let me remember that. Like, she's told me a story. Let me actually listen to her, right? And we're in such a world where it's like, hey, even today I was on a couple calls and the guy I was on the call with, like his phone was he's literally scrolling while I was just like, and it was like very unconscious, right? So I didn't say anything and now like I'm very intentional. I turn my phone the other way around,
Yep.
and that's it. Like I don't look at it, and it's just normal in our culture to not even listen to people, right? And
When
so
you said actually listen, I feel like can we just do you want to tattoo those on my forehead for me because I think that in and of it. And here's the thing about it is I don't think we realize we're not actually listening
yes,
because of these like just habits that distract us. And the amount of times, for instance, I mean, I will admit there have been, I don't admit this to my husband who luckily isn't listening, that he'll talk to me and I will absentmindedly pick up my phone. And then he's like, WTF. And I'm like, what?
yeah, and I look,
Right?
it goes back to leadership, right? So if you have a leader in a room and they're doing that, well, what example does that set for the team, right?
Yeah.
And so it's all these leadership behaviors that have such a cascading effect on the rest of the group.
Yes. And it's up to us to model the behavior we want, no matter what leadership position we're in, whether it's at work, at home, or whatever it is. On the phone thing, by the way, here's a fun tip. And get ready, Ron, because I'm about to ask you for some tips that aren't like this, but leadership tips. But ironically, I saw while doom scrolling the other day a tip, which has been very, very helpful, which is every time you pick up your phone, stop and think about why you're picking up your phone.
I love it.
Why am I picking this up? I'm picking this up to do X versus, oh, I don't know why I'm picking this up. It was absent-minded. And it will totally change your awareness around it.
Yes,
And
yes,
actually within 10 days, you'll stop using it as much. So there you go.
amazing.
There's a leadership productivity hack for you. And now, Ron, I'm coming over to you. We've talked a lot about the benefits of human first leadership, the benefits of culture, and thinking about your team as the humans that they are and why we should do that. I would love to talk about some of the how. So, what are some tips for leaders out there who want to foster a culture where both performance and personal fulfillment actually coexist?
Yeah, no, and again, I'll go back to one of my experiences, right? Like very busy finance environment. This was a craft, and our VP at the time said, "I'm going to create these EOEs, employee organizational engagement, or something like that." And it was very counterintuitive because we were at the busiest period we ever had. He's like, "I'm
Mm.
going to create a networking committee. I'm going to create a leadership academy. I'm going to create all these things," and we're all rolling our eyes, like, "Why would we? Why would our teams want to do this?"
Why are
And
we
then,
doing this on March
and
14th?
well, interestingly enough, we got volunteers for each of the committee. I was on some of them. And then the Gallup scores come out, and finance is at the top of the list, despite being probably the most hours, the very high stress environment. And then a couple of years later, we had a new CFO come in, and she had a different philosophy. She's like, I'm going to cut all this stuff to help my team focus on their core responsibilities. Our Gallup scores went way down. Like, we went from first to last. So the first thing is really investing in our people, even in those counterintuitive times. And then the other thing,
maybe mostly in the counterintuitive times, even.
Yes. And the other counterintuitive point is like, usually if, let's say you have a really crazy week coming up and there's a team meeting on Monday, 10 to 11 a.m., many leaders will cancel that meeting, say, hey, we need to focus on our core stuff. I say, okay, shorten the meeting, but keep the communication even higher, right? So there's things like that to say as a leader. How do you communicate? How do you listen? How do you really understand what is causing the issues and how do we help solve them, right? And those types of things go a big way. And one other thing, I always ask the question, I do these sessions for teams, workshops, and it's about recognition. So I say, does anyone not like being recognized? I do it very sarcastically. Of course, nobody puts their hand up. Yes, private, public, there's different ways of recognizing somebody. But there's a study I quote, which says the high performance teams on average have a 6-to-1 ratio of positive to constructive feedback. Okay. I was brought up in finance, so there was basically not a lot of, like, if it's
there were
not
no
broke,
sixes.
don't fix it. Yeah. Or the sandwich mentality, right? Which we're all familiar with, like sandwich, I think that's obsolete. So I think if you have a high trust environment, you can, if there's a hard conversation to be had, have it. But what I really learned with that 6-to-1 rule is, like, there's so many small and big opportunities to recognize people. Hey, Angie, I love the energy you brought into that team meeting, right? Hey, thanks for having your camera on where nobody else would have their camera on. Like, just like all these little things. So imagine having an environment where you're catching people doing things right all the time. Like, managers are actively looking for it, as opposed to an environment where it's like, hey, if it's not broken, don't fix it. I don't want to disturb. People love being recognized. And back to the human connection. Again, one of the podcasts I did, Howard Bahara mentioned, he said he'd do like hundreds of these hand-signed cards all the time. He said people would take those cards when they're moving from home to home and they discard most of their personal possessions. Like, that's the type of value people have, right? Yeah. So like, have you ever worked for a leader where, like, wow, I know they care and they've done all the, done some things to show it. So to me, those type of environments really excite me, and they don't happen that often.
They are few and far between, but I think what's amazing about it is when you work in it, you then carry that forward when you become a leader, and it perpetuates itself because you know how powerful it is. And, I don't know why you struck a nerve with the 6-to-1 positive to constructive feedback thing, because I also think something that needs to die a quick and very painful death is the annual performance review, because it is the opposite of 6-to-1, right? It is, let's go 364 days and not tell you you're doing anything right or anything wrong so that you have the ability to fix it, and just leave you to wonder what the hell you're up to.
Yeah. Like, the annual review should not be a surprise, right? And look, to me, I do like it if done well, because I think it's time dedicated to, like, if I was doing it for my team members, I would spend a lot of time preparing for it. I would get feedback from their stakeholders. I would try to be very balanced in terms of, hey, here's what's working well. Here's some things we can work on together for next year. And I think the other thing that goes with a great culture is that direct conversation. So being willing to have a very direct conversation. And, I think Brene Brown said, clear is kind, right? It's a powerful little statement, but that's also an indication of a great culture. People are almost obligated to have that tough conversation in a future looking way, not in a beat me up about it, but it's like, hey, here's something you can work for. And I had the feedback early in my career saying, Ron, you don't have executive presence in those big meetings. It wasn't done to put me down. The second half of the conversation was, hey, let's work on that. Let's get you some experiences. And now, like, I can easily go into an executive room because I've had that training, mentorship, coaching, all these things that have helped me get there.
Yeah. I agree that you can do performance reviews well. So I will take the friendly amendment. What you cannot do is say nothing for 364 days and
Yeah.
then blindside someone with something that they could have corrected 362 days ago if you just had some balls and went and talked to them. Because
Yeah.
where in society did direct communication become a bad thing? Asking for a friend, her name is Angie, and she is a female direct communicator who oftentimes gets labeled the capital B word because that's what happens when you're a female direct communicator in a society where that has somehow become a problem.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It should never be a surprise, right? Like it should be ongoing feedback both ways, right? Like there should, there's also been in organizations where there's complete reluctance to provide upward feedback because the culture doesn't, it's just not a culture which does that, right? And I had this strange experience where in finance, Friday afternoons, it was Friday, summer Fridays for the office, right? So first Friday I was there, I'm pack up my stuff, go to my team, like, let's go. And they're like, finance doesn't do that. So I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, go around the office, and literally everybody in finance was in their cubes or offices. I go to find out the only reason they were there is my boss, who was a CFO, used to catch up on Fridays. He didn't even have an idea that people were still there. And nobody had brought it up. And I was just like, I talked to him. I said, here's what's going on in finance. He's like, what? I didn't understand, right? Because he would just shut the door and stay for 6 hours.
And it was the classic, we can't leave until the boss leaves.
Boss plus 5, right? Boss plus 5, let's go.
Oh my gosh, I love it. So let's, we're down a little bit of everything that's wrong rabbit hole. So let's return to positivity, because I think that's where you and I both sit in the whole No More Mondays, Love Mondays movement. And we've touched on a few things that I think you and I are both seeing indicators of as we move into kind of the future. But like, what gives you hope about where leadership and corporate and work is going?
Yeah, no. So I think we've talked a lot about leaders and organizations and stuff like that. I want to take this back to the individual, right?
Yeah.
And again, look, I'm a business owner and I don't get paid every 2 weeks. So I like to say, instead of I have to go to work, I get to go to work. And I think there's a lot of personal responsibility as opposed to blame the boss, blame the culture. Like, those are real. We talked about it. But what can I do as an individual working as a company to love my Mondays a little bit more? How can I lean into the things that light me up in my job and maybe try to figure out a way to make those things that don't light me up, less of my time? How do I ask for the things that I think are my superpowers? And again, I'll use another story. I used to work at this company, and this one girl hated Mondays. Like it was on her face. And then by Friday, she was like, I got through it. It was that painful. And then her manager came to me and said, look, I have this person who has some capacity. Do you have some work? I said, of course I have some work. So I gave her some work, and she started to light up because she was doing things that she loved. And she had a very artistic kind of sense to her. So I had her putting up stuff in the plant and on the TVs. And then somebody asked me now, do you know anyone who teaches PowerPoint? And I immediately pointed to her. And so she's doing some work for me because it's come full circle. So she's now doing stuff that she actually loves to do, as opposed to doing the stuff, just to pay the bills. And look, when I first started my career, I was just doing stuff to pay the bills. I had big loans. I didn't care if it was Monday or Friday. I needed to pay. But then I bring it back to, what can we do as individuals to learn how to do the things that we love to do and then really go for it, right?
Yeah.
And not many people just say, I'm going to go for it. I want to move from finance to marketing. I'm going to learn everything I can about it. And I'm going to show that I'm competent, confident, and I'm going to do the work, put in the hours, and invest in yourself such that you can love your Mondays.
And do something, I think, is the big thing, right? Nobody is going to, even if you have a great leader who puts you in a place that, you work well, even that leader is not going to advocate for you and your career growth the way that you individually can. And you can always go back to finance, but you can't go try the other thing. And that is scary good, discovering life beyond the Sunday scaries, people. That is you can stay mediocre and just do the thing that you're already doing, or you can take agency and actually advocate for yourself and try something that you might hate, but at least now you hate it. or you may love, because yes, everybody, there is somebody out there who likes to make PowerPoints.
Yeah, like look, I use example. If when I started my business 5 years ago, it was a big risk and financial challenges, all these things. I went through some tough times the first couple of years, but I would have had zero regrets if I failed in my business and I went back to work to a corporate job because I went for it. And I think that hesitation sometimes is what really, hurts us because we're like, we probably know there's something out there, but the risk often outweighs the potential benefit in people's minds, and it's just easy to be comfortable. I had this one lady who used to sit in the office beside me, and she'd be like, 15 years till retirement. I'm like, how is that even possible that our society has that type of mentality? And I don't blame anybody because it is hard, right? It is hard to step out of your comfort zone or say I'm going to do something totally different.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole spirit of this, is to say, hey, life is short, go for it.
So you mentioned you made a quick drop of the Super Bowl. I'll make a quick drop of something that happened right around the Super Bowl a couple weeks ago. My friend Lindsey Vaughn. I'm a big skier. We are big outdoor enthusiasts. And so we were watching her story very heavily all through this season and the ramp up and her, amazing qualifications for the Olympics. And I have seen some real hate out there for the fact that she went and she did this, in that she even competed with, a torn ACL. First of all, if you have never had a torn ACL, you do not even know how much of a feat that is to begin with. But I can guarantee you, horribly fractured tibia and all the physical pain that she is carrying from her injury, the mental anguish of not having tried would have been greater. And she even said as much. However, if she had not tried, she always would have wondered, could I have gotten gold at 41? And now she knows the answer to that. And yes, it resulted in pain, and it was hard. However, she will never have to wonder. And I guarantee you that is an easier, damn, I broke my leg, versus the idea of regret. And while it is a kind of an extreme example, it goes back to exactly what you pointed out, Ron. And that is that if you don't love Mondays, you're not going to love Mondays doing exactly what you're doing. And when you're 62 and a half and not physically able to do all the things you wish you had done 20 years ago, you're not going to be able to rewind the clock 20 years ago. Best time to plant a shade tree was 20 years ago. Next best time, today.
Yeah, I love that. And I listened to Steve Jobs' commencement speech at Stanford a few times a year. And he always talks about, like, if you look in the mirror like 3-4 days in a row and you're not excited to do what you're doing, keep looking. Like, he has a very eloquent quote, which I didn't say, but that's the spirit. Like, are you loving what you're doing? Is it a hell yes? Or is it just, I'm going to work my way through these 90,000 hours? Like, that makes no sense. And then one other book, like, obviously you're a book person, that I've read that was really impactful to me, is The 5 Regrets of the Dying.
Yes.
And one of the biggest regrets is I worked too much. Another one is I didn't live the life that was true to myself.
Yep. And spoiler
and those
alert,
all connect.
And spoiler alert, there is not a 6 that's I wish I would have made more money.
100%.
Also, for those of you not watching, I think Ron and I have the exact same books on our bookshelves. I can see at least 3 titles that I'm like, yep, have that one, yep, have that one, yep, have that one. So no surprise that No More Mondays is hosting Love Mondays. Speaking of which, Ron, how do we get your book? How do we learn more about you? How do we follow along in the No More Mondays, Love Mondays wisdom that you have to offer?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm just, holding up a copy of my book. It's a bright yellow book, Love Mondays, and it's on Amazon and Audible. So that's essentially where you can get it. And I'm very active on LinkedIn. So that's where I kind of share a lot of my content related to this.
Love it. And if you are following along here on LinkedIn, go ahead on over. Ron and I are connected, so you can find him and catch his wisdom. And for those of you listening on podcast land, all of these links, book and Ron's LinkedIn, will be in the show notes for you to grab after you pull into the destination, because I know you are inevitably in a car right now. So as we wrap things up, Ron, I'm gonna kind of put you on the spot and one more future prediction. But I'm curious, as we think more about this future of work ecosystem, what can we as humans do to stay whole and purposeful while navigating whatever is to come?
Yeah, I think it is a lot of reflection on purpose, right? To use that word, like
Mm.
what is our superpower, right? And I believe we all have superpowers. Like, what are you in flow? What do you really love to do? And even if it's like as a side hustle, as something you're doing, instead of scrolling on your phone, it's like, what can you do to really lean into what really gives you a lot of energy, right? And so I think that's where individually we can do that work to say, what are the things that light me up and how can we
Mhm.
lean into it at work, at home, and really lean into it and break the paradigm of Mondays is not a fun day.
Yeah. Break the case of the Mondays,
Yes.
right? Man, that movie was so good. Office Space, for all you youngins out there, go watch it. It will give you an entirely new perspective on what it means to work in a cubicle and what it means to have cases of the Monday. But I think the big thing here, there's two big things that I want to say is that if you are a leader, you have a responsibility to build a culture where people want to work and can grow. That's one. Two, if you are someone working in that environment, you owe it to yourself to be curious and advocate for yourself and do more things that light you up. Don't keep doing the things that don't, if you want to be more fulfilled. It's a good TLDR, don't you think?
I love that. And the one thing I'd add to that is surround yourself with the people who you admire, who
Yeah.
give you a lot of energy, right? Because that's the type of spirit. If you see people, wow, I love what they're doing. Let me go spend more time with them. Let me ask this. That's the type of spirit that will help you break free of maybe patterns that we're in.
Yes, you don't have to do all this alone. Obviously, Ron and I are here. Reach out to us if we can help indirectly, directly, or in a LinkedIn message to just give you some encouragement. But I feel that in the ecosystem we were talking about earlier, where like feedback is hard, direct communications aren't what they used to be, people don't like telling people what they don't want to hear. You're never going to get anywhere if you don't advocate for yourself, because that's going to require you telling somebody something they don't want to hear. But ultimately, you've got only you know what's best for you, and you've got to make those decisions and take action towards it if you want to be a more purposeful, fulfilled human and love
Love
Mondays
it.
more. There it is.
Perfect.
Ron Monteiro, everybody, thank you so much for joining me today.
Angie, thank you so much. And congrats once again on the book.
Thank you so much. Likewise, even though it's been a minute, but these are important stories that people like Ron and I bring to you because we want to give you inspiration, not just to rethink your Mondays, but the intention behind how you show up for the rest of the week in life and in work. And you never know, it might just be scary good. Couldn't resist myself. To all of you out there listening, thank you for tuning in. Ron, thank you once more for being here for No More Mondays. I will see you all next week for another episode of No More Mondays podcast.